In every war, there are files that never surface, names that vanish from rosters, and missions erased by their own success. What survives are fragments, coded dispatches, faded carbon copies, reels of film with missing frames. They tell of operations launched under cover of surrender, of technologies that shouldn't have existed, and of men who walked into the shadows of a collapsing world and never returned. These are not stories of glory, but of silence. Reconstructed from declassified fragments, intercepted transmissions, and testimony long suppressed, what follows are the unburied ghosts of a war that never truly ended. Chapter 1: The Forgotten Men of Operation Iron Key. In the winter of 1945, with Germany collapsing under the combined weight of Allied advance and Soviet aggression, the Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force authorized a final series of containment missions under Directive 217B, Asset Interdiction. Most of these operations targeted known Nazi research hubs, attempting to prevent sensitive technologies from falling into Soviet hands. One such assignment was codenamed Operation Iron Key. Its existence was mentioned only once in the SHAF Logistics Registry, signed by Colonel William C. Rourke of the 12th Army Group, then redacted in full by Spring. According to the few surviving fragments, Iron Key was launched on March 8, 1945, from an improvised field post near Kassel. The mission directive referred to securing convoy assets proceeding southward from Blankenberg under SS escort. The unit assigned a composite detachment from the 5th Ranger Battalion and the British 30 Assault Unit, working jointly under an unnamed liaison officer. Their orders were explicit: intercept and retrieve unspecified research materials, reportedly bound for a subterranean complex near the Harz Mountains. The convoy was said to comprise 5 trucks marked with Reich postal insignia, escorted by an SS technical regiment commanded by an Obersturmbannführer whose name remains classified. By March 10th, reconnaissance flights over the Blankenberg sector identified vehicle movements consistent with the convoy description. The Rangers mobilized at dawn. No further communication from the team was received after 2300 hours. Post-war records from the US Signal Corps confirm that all radio transmissions from the area ceased abruptly at 2304. An internal memo filed under Incident Operation Iron Key lost contact was logged but never followed up. The file was sealed under the newly formed European Command's Restricted Archive in 1946. In 1962, a retired British intelligence analyst, Commander Harold S. Venn, referred to the operation in a private letter to historian Dr. Peter Latham. Venn wrote, "The Rangers didn't lose contact. They were silenced. Something was found in those trucks, and that's where the paper trail ends." Attached to his letter was a photostat of a single surviving field log page, stamped "Eyes Only." The last line, barely legible, read, "We have the cargo." Proceeding toward grid W19, encountered resistance, not hostile, but irregular. Grid W19 corresponded to a stretch of forest road south of Ilsenburg, a zone later occupied by Soviet forces. When British and American liaison officers attempted to inspect the area in May, Soviet command refused entry, citing contamination concerns. In 1947, aerial imagery from Operation Lusty revealed a burned-out convoy matching Iron Key's target description. 5 charred trucks, scattered equipment, no identifiable insignia. What alarmed analysts most were the containers, lead-lined cylinders, several ruptured and emitting measurable radiation. Subsequent Allied reports suggested these were related to the Uran project, the Nazi nuclear development program, but internal correspondence within the US Atomic Energy Commission cast doubt. A 1951 memorandum, declassified only in part, stated, "Samples obtained from Iron Key wreckage exhibit non-standard isotopic composition inconsistent with known uranium enrichment practices. Recommend continued suppression under Project Paperclip jurisdiction." No mention of the personnel was made. Their families were informed of non-combat disappearance. In 1989, following the fall of the Berlin Wall, East German archival staff uncovered microfilm reels labeled Project Nachtbrief, containing correspondence between SS Technical Command and an entity known as Station Nacht. The communications, dated March 3-6, 1945, reference successful containment of phase materials, to be transferred under armed escort to Hart's facility per Führerbefehl. One notation in red pencil adds, "Ensure no contact with foreign observers. Exposure unstable. Station Nacht has never been identified on any wartime German map. Its name appears nowhere else in the Reich Ministry's archives. Yet one of the microfilm images shows a crude floor plan. Tunnels descending beneath a granite ridge, rooms marked Kammer 3 and Reactor." Historians analysing the sketches noted structural similarities to Mittelwerk, the underground site where V-2 rockets were assembled using forced labour. However, no record indicates any connection between Mittelwerk personnel and Station Nacht. In 1993, fragments of a field radio were discovered in the same region by amateur relic hunters. The serial number corresponded to a model issued to the 5th Rangers in late 1944. Inside the corroded casing was a waterlogged notebook page, preserved enough to read, "Iron key has been turned. The door is open." The handwriting matched that of Lieutenant James D. Colton, one of the missing operatives. When this discovery was submitted to the Bundesarchiv for verification, the material was promptly reclassified by NATO's Historical Security Division. The report's custodian, archivist Ingrid Weiler, later stated in a private interview, "We were told not to list it. It was treated like it never arrived." The recovered fragments have not been seen publicly since. Speculation among military historians suggests Iron Key may have been an unsanctioned retrieval of experimental reactor materials or chemical precursors related to nerve agents being tested under Project Giftmischer. However, the absence of follow-up documentation implies something else, a cover-up not merely of the technology, but of the mission itself. A 2005 joint research paper by the University of Göttingen and King's College London analysed residual soil samples from the supposed site. Trace elements of beryllium and thorium were detected, alongside unexplained anomalies in magnetic readings, evidence consistent with short-lived experimental reactors or electromagnetic containment devices. Yet perhaps the most chilling evidence emerged in 2014, when a retired NATO communications technician anonymously uploaded scans of a 1958 post-mortem analysis draft addressed to the US Office of Scientific Intelligence. The report stated, "Subject, Operation Iron Key, recovery status unknown. Material recorded as retrieved but transport manifest lost. Personnel presumed neutralized by exposure event. Classified as internal containment breach. Exposure event." 2 words buried among 1,000 others, but enough to imply that whatever was recovered from that convoy was not conventional ordnance, not even a reactor component, but something that interacted lethally or unpredictably with the men themselves. Today, the only physical evidence remaining of Operation Iron Key resides in a sealed chamber beneath NATO command in Mons, labelled File EK-214-D. It contains a single lead cylinder recovered from the wreckage site in 1945. Radiation scans show nothing unusual. Yet every attempt to open it in 1946-1951 and again in 1978 was halted after recorded instrumental interference. The names of the men who participated remain struck from official records, but their absence casts a shadow still visible in the classified architecture of post-war intelligence. In a 1972 interview, one anonymous CIA operative described Iron Key as the template for silence. When asked what that meant, he paused, then said, "It was the first time we realized that not every door we open should be opened again." Iron Key remains officially unsolved. The convoy's true purpose, the identity of Station Nacht, and the nature of the cargo vanish in layers of secrecy, spanning 8 decades. What began as a retrieval mission in a collapsing Germany became the foundation for an enduring enigma, the story of men erased not by enemy fire, but by the secrets they carried. Chapter 2: Echoes Beneath the Baltic Sea. The Baltic Sea, 1952. Winter patrols along the Swedish coast reported intermittent sonar reflections that defied all known vessel signatures. The source appeared fixed, metallic, and alive with a faint but persistent electromagnetic pulse. Swedish Navy Command designated it Object G77. The discovery came at a time when Cold War paranoia was peaking. Moscow accused Stockholm of aiding NATO surveillance, while NATO suspected Soviet deep-sea testing. In that atmosphere of distrust, Object G77 became a silent flashpoint, a remnant, perhaps, of a war that refused to stay buried beneath the ice. The first anomaly detection occurred on February 16, 1952. Submarine Monitoring Station Karlskrona logged an unidentified harmonic distortion emanating from coordinates WWII, roughly 40 kilometers north of Gotska Sandön. The Swedish corvette HSBUMS Sundsvall was dispatched to investigate. Sonar operators recorded rhythmic pulses every 22 seconds, consistent with electrical activity, not marine life or geological faulting. The ship's captain, Lieutenant CMDR Eric Nylander, filed his report with the phrase, "Contact resembles machine signature. Unknown depth. Metallic resonance confirmed." 2 days later, the pulse ceased. The area fell silent for nearly a month, until April 3rd, when it returned, stronger and more erratic. This time, the Swedish defense staff reached out to NATO's Naval Intelligence Liaison. The United States responded with covert assistance under a newly formed program called Operation Silent Wake. Tasked to determine if the Soviets were deploying experimental submersibles, the USS Codfish, a Ballow-class submarine retrofitted for reconnaissance, departed Portsmouth and entered Swedish waters under civilian registry. The crew of the Codfish reached object G77's coordinates on April 11. Using advanced magnetometers, they detected an enormous ferrous mass approximately 70 meters below the surface, half buried in sediment. Preliminary analysis suggested a U-boat hull, but one that appeared far too modern for 1945 manufacture. Divers identified markings near the conning tower, U-4029. No such vessel had ever been listed in Kriegsmarine records. The official registry ended at U-4005, yet the hull bore distinct German naval architecture, welded with post-1944 techniques known only from late war prototypes. Inside, the airlock was sealed but intact. The divers breached the entry on April 13th. What they found suspended within the dark steel chamber defied classification. Control consoles of mixed origin, some with Cyrillic stenciling, others bearing the swastika eagle insignia. The ship's manifest, printed on damp, degraded paper, referenced Reichspost Ultra Geheim. The log's last entry, dated April 29, 1945, recorded a departure from Königsberg for rendezvous with base Nordlicht. The handwriting was trembling, hurried. Crates were stacked along the corridor, their surfaces charred as if from internal fire. Within one, the team uncovered a partially melted machine, coils, copper filaments, and a glass housing containing corroded metal spheres. The device emitted residual magnetism, enough to cause compass interference. The divers photographed every angle before it was sealed and transported aboard the Codfish. By April 14th, 2 crewmen reported severe nausea, dizziness, and unexplained nosebleeds. Within 48 hours, the Codfish reported to Naval Command that the object was being secured in containment. The next day, all communications ceased for 13 hours. The official explanation for that blackout was solar interference. Unofficially, engineering logs recovered from the vessel's archives decades later reveal repeated system failures during those hours. Magnetic fluctuations, loss of gyroscopic control, and spontaneous radio transmission, bursts broadcasting in both German and Russian Morse code. The frequencies corresponded to those used by German long-range transmitters in 1944, yet the source appeared internal to the Codfish itself. When the submarine resurfaced at Karlskrona on April 17th, the cargo was offloaded under Swedish oversight and promptly transferred to US custody under diplomatic privilege. The machine, now designated Artifact 12S, was shipped to a containment facility at Porton Down in the United Kingdom. By 1954, both the artifact and all associated documents were classified under NATO. Intelligence Reference D1597, restricted for reasons of experimental hazard. A single page from the original Codfish report was later declassified. Recovered object exhibits unknown signal output, frequency oscillations between 2.3 and 7.1 MHz. Suggest possible communications device. Reactivation unadvised. Throughout the 1960s, fragments of correspondence between the US Navy's Office of Naval Research and the RAND Corporation referenced a German-Russian hybrid sonar transceiver capable of long-range underwater data transmission. These documents, now heavily redacted, all cite Silent Wake as the original field designation. Notably, Multiple memos from 1962 mention physiological distress among the codfish, divers consistent with radiation exposure, though radiation tests at Porton Down showed nothing abnormal. In 1986, after Swedish intelligence reforms opened portions of Cold War archives, a box labeled Baltic Incident G77 was discovered in the Försvarsstabens basement. Among routine logs was a photographic plate, the sonar image of object G77 taken on April 11, 1952. The outline clearly showed a U-boat hull approximately 88 meters long, nearly 10 meters longer than any Type WWII submarine ever built. When examined with modern imaging, small protrusions along the dorsal line suggested antenna-like extensions, one bearing the silhouette of a radar mast unknown to WWII engineering. An internal memo from a Swedish defense scientist, dated 1987, summarized it succinctly. We do not know who built this vessel when it was launched, or why its materials appear decades ahead of 1945 metallurgy. The Soviet Union denied all knowledge of U-4029, yet KGB archives declassified after 1991 revealed cryptic references to Recovered Western Prototype, 1946, and Operation Volna. Both mention recovery of foreign sonar capsule with incomprehensible circuit layout from the Baltic region. Western analysts now believe the Soviets retrieved at least one secondary object, near the same coordinates, possibly debris from U-4029's destruction. The mystery deepened in 1999, when divers exploring the wreck again found an additional sealed compartment. Inside lay a single lead-lined capsule engraved with both a Reichsadler emblem and a hammer and sickle stamp, suggesting joint German-Soviet collaboration, a hypothesis historians still debate. The capsule's interior contained a water-damaged reel of magnetic tape, labeled in red pencil, Sphärische Übertragung, Versuch Wärme 4. Translation: Spherical transmission test, number 4. Attempts to play the tape produced only distortion, rhythmic pulses and faint whispers consistent with radio feedback. Audio analysts detected layered Morse code beneath the noise, spelling one repeated phrase, nicht öffnen, do not open. Today, Object G77 remains on the seabed north of Gotska Sanden, classified as a hazard site by both Sweden and NATO. Continuous sonar monitoring reveals occasional weak electromagnetic surges, identical in frequency to those first detected in 1952. Swedish naval archives note that no marine life occupies a 1-kilometer radius around the wreck. The codfish itself was decommissioned in 1958 and dismantled at Portsmouth, or so official records state. Former crewmen interviewed decades later insist that the submarine's hull was transferred to a classified naval research yard instead. One of them, sonar technician Gerald Pike, described the incident shortly before his death in 1983. That thing was still speaking when we left it, like the sea itself was repeating something it wanted us to remember. If Pike's words are true, then perhaps the pulse of Object G77 was never a malfunction, never a remnant of war, but a signal continuing from the depths, looping endlessly since 1945. The echoes beneath the Baltic are not silence, they are transmission, waiting for a receiver that may never come. Chapter 3. The Shadow Factory of Thuringia. April 1945. Central Germany burned under the collapsing weight of the Reich. Allied bombers shredded what remained of industry, while SS demolition teams destroyed archives by the ton. Yet amid the chaos, aerial reconnaissance from the US 9th Air Force recorded an anomaly, smoke columns rising from an uncharted sector near Nordhausen, Thuringia. The coordinates, roughly 6 kilometers east of the Mittelwerk complex, showed signs of continuous power output. When ground patrols from the 104th Infantry Division arrived days later, they found nothing but forest and soil that trembled faintly underfoot, as if hollow beneath the surface. Officially, the sector was marked cleared. The focus turned to the Mittelwerk tunnels, where V-2 rockets had been assembled by slave labor from the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp. Hundreds of engineers were interrogated and transferred under Operation Paperclip, but some among them, notably SS engineer Dr. Otto Weiss and Siemens consultant Friedrich Harl, spoke cryptically of a second installation operating under the same code umbrella. Project Morgan wrote, The name appeared nowhere in Allied archives until a Soviet photo dossier emerged decades later, showing reinforced concrete shafts descending into the Harz Mountains, capped by ventilation towers disguised as forestry huts. The photos were dated May 18, 1945, days after the war's end. The Soviets sealed off the area by July. No Allied personnel were allowed entry. NKVD reports declassified in the 1990s list the zone as Object 1226, Experimental Power Facility. The translation from Russian adds a single annotation, possibly bioelectric synchronization technology. Western analysts debated the term for years. It reappeared in an intercepted 1951 radio transmission between East German technicians near Ilfeld. Testing of synchronization coil complete. Subject responded within tolerances. Reconstructed fragments from both Allied and Soviet archives reveal a chilling pattern. Project Morgenrot appeared to merge biological and electromagnetic research, an attempt to interface human neural activity with machine control systems, likely intended for aircraft stabilization or unmanned guidance. A report authored by captured SS Oberst Karl Dietrich described an operator feedback interface that transmitted pilot impulses directly to servo mechanisms. Dietrich's interrogators dismissed the idea as pseudoscience, but British intelligence kept his notes, filed under T-90 Alpha, and revisited them in 1949, when similar technology appeared in captured Soviet prototypes. According to post-war Siemens records unearthed by German historian Lothar Kuhn, Thuringia's shadow facility had been under joint SS and Siemens jurisdiction since 1943. Its stated purpose was synchronization of biological patterns for precision, instrumentation. Witnesses from the Dora labor camp later recalled prisoners being transferred to an area beyond the forest for electrical testing. None returned. An internal memorandum from January 1945 lists requisitions for high-frequency oscillators, mercury vapor tubes, and human test material. Another page references Kammer 3, Versuchsperson 8, when translated, Chamber 3, test subjects. A through H. The chamber itself appears in two surviving Soviet photographs, a room lined with copper mesh, a central operating table surrounded by consoles labeled in both Cyrillic and Gothic script. Wires hang from the ceiling like veins. A chalkboard displays the phrase Körperresonanz, synchron 0.12 sec, meaning body resonance synchronization 0.12 seconds. Whatever was happening in Thuringia was not ordinary weapons research. The site went silent in May 1945 when Soviet sappers detonated entry tunnels under supervision of NKVD engineers. The official record declares all materials destroyed, yet seismic logs from nearby mining operations show repeated underground detonations through 1957, more than a decade after the supposed demolition. Each event lasted several minutes and was accompanied by power fluctuations in East German electrical grids. In 1998, a joint German-Russian archival review unearthed a 1952 Soviet technical report labeled Operation Sfera. The document, marked Top Secret, Ministry of State Security, contains schematic sketches almost identical to Dietrich's 1944 diagrams. The first page reads, Continuation of Morgenrot Initiative under Soviet authority. Progress adequate. Biological synchronization remains unstable. The last paragraph mentions a transfer of Western experts obtained via Operation Osławiakim, the Soviet counterpart to Paperclip. If these notes are genuine, they confirm that the Soviets did not simply inherit German rocketry. They continued its darker frontier, merging living systems with electrical control. Eyewitness accounts further complicate the story. In 1964, a former Soviet technician named Mikhail Tarasov defected to the west through Finland. During debriefing at Camp King, he mentioned working near Nordhausen in a sealed underground complex between 1949 and 1951. Tarasov described large rotating drums, each with a human silhouette strapped inside, illuminated by pulsing strobe light. He claimed the subject's heart rates synchronized perfectly with the machinery until the pulse stopped. The CIA dismissed his statements as Cold War fabrication. But in 2003, German geologists conducting soil surveys for a highway expansion near Ilfeld discovered metallic fragments embedded deep beneath the forest floor. Analysis revealed alloys consistent with 1940s Siemens manufactured components, but doped with bismuth, an unusual element for that era. more commonly found in experimental magnetics. Radiation readings were negligible, yet electromagnetic scans detected a faint residual field around the fragments. When exposed to alternating current, they vibrated subtly, as if remembering a frequency. A week after the samples were sent to the Bundesamt für Strahlenschutz for testing, the shipment was confiscated by Bundeswehr personnel. The official reason? Improper handling of classified artifacts. The geologists were ordered to sign non-disclosure agreements. Declassified. Stasi Communications later revealed that the East German Ministry for State Security maintained an active monitoring post near Nordhausen well into the 1980s. Listed as Listening Station TH23, intercept logs include periodic references to residual harmonics and biological return signal anomalies. One entry from 1979 reads, "Signal returned again at 0317, strength moderate, duration 12 seconds, identical waveform to 45 recording." No such recording has ever been made public. Today, the forests of Thuringia stand quiet. The tunnels of Mittelwerk have become a museum of atrocity, visited by tourists and historians alike. Yet the area east of Nordhausen remains fenced, monitored by unmarked equipment, and guarded under the authority of Germany's Federal Office for Infrastructure Protection. Officially, the land conceals unexploded ordnance. Locals call it Der Schattenberg, the Shadow Hill. At night, they claim low hums ripple through the ground, like distant machinery turning somewhere far below. Whether it's the shifting of the earth or the echo of something engineered to synchronize with the human pulse, no one can say. What is certain is that the Soviet term Operation Sphera vanished from their archives after 1957. Its final notation reads, "Subject harmonization incomplete. Further study prohibited. Facility sealed." The last line, in faded Cyrillic, translates to, "Signal persists, autonomous." The shadow factory of Thuringia remains buried, its entrance lost, its purpose obscured. Yet for every secret facility unearthed since the war, one question repeats across the margins of every declassified page. What if some machines were built not to serve man, but to remember him? Chapter 4. The Missing Convoy of Lake Ladoga. Winter, 1942. The siege of Leningrad had entered its deadliest phase. Temperatures dropped below 30°E, starvation set in, and the frozen expanse of Lake Ladoga became the city's only lifeline. Soviet engineers carved a precarious ice road across the surface, the road of life. Every night, convoys of trucks laden with food and ammunition crawled over the shifting ice under bombardment. Among these was convoy K-17, listed in Soviet transport records as departed from Kobona at 0230 hours. February 12th, its destination, Osinovets, the supply depot at the edge of Leningrad's defenses. It never arrived. At first, K-17's disappearance was attributed to enemy artillery. Luftwaffe records indeed show a bombing raid over the lake that night, but no wreckage, debris, or oil traces were ever found. The convoy simply vanished. Soviet archival reports, filed in 1943 under the Northern Front's Logistics Division, described the loss as under enemy fire, total destruction. Yet the entry's signature block was left blank, as if no officer wanted their name attached. 3 decades later, in 1974, a Finnish diver named Arvo Heikkinen claimed to have located remnants of a sunken vehicle near the same coordinates recorded for K-17. The truck lay embedded in ice strata, its wooden cargo still intact. Inside the crates were precision lenses marked Carl Zeiss Jena, stamped with the Reich Eagle, and a German directive sheet written in bureaucratic shorthand. Lieferung für Sondergerät, Abteilung R. Translation: Shipment for Special Equipment, Department R. Heikkinen photographed one document and delivered it to a Helsinki journalist. 2 days later, Soviet authorities seized both the diver and his materials. He was released months later, reportedly in poor health, his notes missing. He died in 1977, official cause, heart failure. The photograph survived in a private collection and surfaced again in 1991 after the Soviet collapse. When enhanced, faint writing on the crate appears to read Optic K-17A. Cross-referencing the marking revealed a connection to an obscure German military research unit, the Abteilung Rosenberg, known to have coordinated looted scientific materials from occupied territories, particularly optics and instrumentation. What such cargo was doing on a Soviet supply convoy remains unexplained. A joint Russian-Finnish expedition in 2003 used side-scan sonar to re-examine the area. The results were startling. Beneath the ice shelf, 20 meters below the sediment, they detected a large metallic structure, cylindrical, with a diameter of 40 meters and length exceeding 100. Its curvature resembled neither a submarine nor a natural formation. The anomaly was surrounded by several smaller metallic returns, possibly the remains of vehicles. Radiation readings were low, but magnetic disturbances caused repeated malfunctions in the sonar array. When the team requested permission to continue drilling, Russian authorities intervened. Access was revoked for safety reasons. Unreleased reports from that expedition, leaked to academic circles, suggest that divers briefly reached the structure's outer hull. One of them described smooth metal with an embossed pattern resembling riveted plates, yet lacking corrosion despite decades underwater. They also reported a faint humming sound, like machinery idling behind the ice. Communication ceased shortly after. The surviving divers later claimed their recording equipment malfunctioned entirely when submerged within 50 meters of the anomaly. Their footage was confiscated. Soviet military documentation from 1942 offers new context. A recently declassified memo from the People's Commissariat of Internal Affairs, NKVD, labeled Urgent Operation Glaz, orders secure transit of foreign apparatus from Petrozavodsk to Leningrad via convoy route K-17. The memo's closing line reads, "Ensure absolute secrecy, priority above all other supply." Attached was a requisition list that included optical instruments, calibration components, and an item coded as device AR9. Historians suspect AR stood for Ahnenerbe Rosenberg, linking it directly to Nazi occult research networks. The presence of German technology on a Soviet convoy in 1942 raises the possibility of covert trade between Reich and Soviet scientists, a claim officially dismissed but privately discussed among Cold War historians. At that time, even as the nations were at war, remnants of pre-1941 research alliances may have persisted in hidden channels. Further evidence appeared in 2007 when Russian archaeologist Dr. Elena Sokolova obtained fragments of what appeared to be photographic glass plates recovered from a submerged wooden crate near Ladoga's western bank. The images showed close-up microstructures of crystal lenses and what seemed to be magnified organic material fused with silica. A note scrawled in German cursive read, "Fusion Versuch 5, Refen Glas." Fusion Experiment 5, Reference Glas. When Sokolova attempted to publish her findings, her research grant was revoked. She later emigrated to Finland, where she claimed the original glass negatives emitted low-frequency vibrations detectable by sensitive microphones. Her last communication in 2011 mentioned she was being followed by men who spoke neither Russian nor Finnish. She has not been heard from since modern Russian Federation. Documents still list the coordinates of the K-17 anomaly as restricted scientific site. The designation changed in 2015 from geological hazard to active monitoring zone. Local fishermen report periodic interference with radios and compasses when crossing the marked sector. During winter nights, faint blue light has been seen beneath the frozen surface. Dismissed officially as natural bioluminescence, though witnesses describe the glow forming precise circular patterns. Military historians believe the contents of convoy K-17 could have involved prototype optics or early laser research, possibly smuggled out of German territories through Finnish intermediaries before the German-Soviet split. Others propose a more disturbing hypothesis, that the convoy was transporting a captured experiment, something neither nation wanted discovered, and that the metallic structure below Ladoga was never a crash site, but a containment vault built hastily to bury it. One overlooked detail in the NKVD memo strengthens that theory. The directive states, cargo must be delivered to lake facility, not beyond, meaning K-17's true destination was the lake itself. No such facility is listed in any wartime Soviet construction record. When post-Soviet engineers mapped Ladoga's subsurface geology in 1999, they noted an artificial cavity, rectangular, with perfectly right-angled corners. directly beneath the supposed coordinates of K-17's disappearance. Its interior temperature measured 2 degrees higher than surrounding ice, and it emitted faint electromagnetic pulses consistent with low-level machinery. Official. Russian statements maintain it is a natural methane deposit, yet no methane has ever been extracted there. If convoy K-17 indeed carried an experimental device or evidence of cooperation between the warring powers, then its burial beneath Ladoga represents more than loss. It is deliberate erasure. The last line of the NKVD transmission, scrawled hastily in blue pencil, reads, "Seal entry. Remove witnesses." 80 years later, the lake remains silent. Beneath its shifting ice, the trucks may still rest, frozen in time, guarding a secret neither the Soviets nor the Germans wished to surface. The echoes of engines lost to the cold whisper through that emptiness, like ghost convoys rolling endlessly toward a destination that was never meant to exist. Chapter 5. Project Ashfall, The Prague Files. May 1945. As the German war machine disintegrated, Prague became a fractured battleground between retreating Wehrmacht remnants, SS holdouts, and Czech resistance fighters. Amid that chaos, a train, commandeered by the Reich Main Security Office, departed from Dresden under heavy escort. Its manifest listed archival material and personnel, but eyewitnesses at Lovosice rail junction described sealed freight cars guarded by men in black, SS uniforms bearing insignia of the Amt Sich, foreign intelligence. The train's codename, scrawled in white chalk on its lead car, read Ashfall. When Czech partisans seized the train during the uprising on May 7th, they found no passengers, no guards, only crates. Hundreds of them. Inside were files, vials of chemical reagents, and reels of magnetic tape marked Project Ashfall. The partisans, uncertain of what they had taken, handed the cargo to Soviet liaison officers. Within days, every document and tape disappeared into the custody of Smersh counterintelligence. For decades, nothing more was heard of Project Ashfall. In 1963, a minor fire broke out at Camp Detrick, Maryland, headquarters of the US Army Biological Warfare Laboratories. Officially, the blaze destroyed old storage materials. Unofficially, internal memos unearthed years later reveal that the destroyed vault contained acquired Reich Ministry assets, chemical file set 9A, Project Ashfall. A single surviving report, partially charred, was recovered. Its title, Molecular Erasure Process, Preliminary Results, Terezin Trials. Terezin, the former fortress-turned-ghetto north of Prague, had long been documented as a site of Nazi medical atrocities. Yet the phrasing, molecular erasure, did not fit any known wartime experiments. The report's opening paragraph described a reactive misting compound capable of decomposing organic tissue without heat, leaving only trace mineral residue. The intended use was listed as rapid disposal of evidence in field operations. The chemical was identified as a binary agent, harmless until combined. Its development allegedly involved the Reich Ministry of Armaments and the SS Ahnenerbe Research Division, supervised by Dr. Friedrich Lenz, a chemist previously attached to IG Farben's Leuna complex. Lenz disappeared in May 1945. His name later surfaced in Soviet records under a new alias, F. Lenov, associated with a classified research group in Minsk between 1946 and 1950. In 2008, a mislabeled roll of microfilm discovered in the Czech National Archive contained 10 photographs of lab notebooks bearing Lenz's handwriting. Each page detailed field tests labeled Phase D, Prague Sector. The final entry read, Subject degradation successful. No trace remains. Process unstable beyond 200 meters. Recommend subterranean application. Scribbled beneath in English was an addition clearly made later. We burned nothing. It still breathes. Cross-analysis of the microfilm emulsion confirmed it matched the type used by US intelligence in the late 1940s, suggesting the roll had once been part of captured Allied materials, later returned or misplaced. That same year, a retired Stasi archivist, Erich Hummel, came forward with an unmarked envelope he claimed to have safeguarded since 1983. Inside were 2 small canisters labeled Ashfall, Versuch 8M. They contained traces of a fine grey dust sealed under wax. Analysis by independent labs revealed the dust's composition: silicon dioxide, protein residues, and a synthetic polymer unknown in the 1940s. When briefly exposed to moisture, the samples emitted measurable heat and an odor described as ozone and burnt metal. Hummel died before further testing. The samples were confiscated by German authorities, citing contamination risk. Declassified OSS documents reference Project Ashfall under a different title, Operation Furnace. A memorandum dated September 1945 notes intercepted enemy research regarding accelerated chemical degradation, potential use, sanitization of facilities prior to Allied entry. The memo further warns that several test sites remain unapproachable due to residual atmospheric instability. Historians have linked this description to reports of entire villages near Prague being cleared by gas accident during the war's final weeks. No surviving inhabitants were ever located. An additional thread emerged in 2012, when Czech geochemists examining groundwater near Terezín detected anomalous trace compounds resembling organosilicates and fluorine derivatives. These matched chemical signatures found in wartime soil samples from IG Farben's Leuna works, a connection long suspected but never proven. The Czech government dismissed the finding as natural industrial contamination, yet the research disappeared from publication databases within weeks. What made Project Ashfall unique among wartime experiments was its dual secrecy. Both Allied and Soviet intelligence treated it not as a war crime, but as a weapon prototype. A 1951 CIA briefing labeled German Special Projects Chemical 217 states plainly, the enemy's goal was elimination of biological traces, including human remains, within minutes, all captured documents destroyed per security directive. When questioned decades later, former CIA archivist Thomas Reed confirmed that such a file number existed but was sealed under Allied-Soviet Agreement 54 Delta. Even more troubling are reports from Czechoslovakia's State Security Service, StB, in the 1960s, describing a series of chemical leaks near Ústí nad Labem traced to unlisted research containers of German origin. Witnesses reported walls and floors dissolving to dust without visible fire. The incidents were never publicly linked to Ashfall, yet CB field reports referenced Material A, matching terminology found in Lentz's Prague notes. In 1970, a NATO chemical warfare specialist named Major Karl Brenner authored a classified review, Residual Threats, Historical Containment Projects. One section discusses a Czech-originated aerosol compound from late Axis archives, noting, exposure limited to minutes causes full organic denaturation. Secondary emission persists, not suitable for use or disposal. The document was declassified in 2001, but the section heading had been blacked out, save for the handwritten annotation in the margin. Ashfall? Despite repeated archival searches, no physical record of the original Ashfall train has surfaced. Its serial number, cargo manifest, and locomotive registry remain missing from both German and Czech wartime logs. Satellite imagery in 2015 revealed linear depressions buried beneath soil east of Kolin, consistent with rail lines hastily dismantled and buried. Local oral history speaks of the ghost train of the uprising, which steamed without smoke and vanished into the forests. Environmental surveys of the region reveal isolated patches of dead vegetation following circular patterns, the soil chemically inert, incapable of supporting life. The Czech Ministry of Environment attributes this to post-war dumping of fuel residue. Independent researchers disagree. Whether Project Ashfall began as an attempt to erase evidence or to perfect the ultimate sanitizing weapon, its legacy remains half visible. Erased names, missing trains, and laboratory ash that refuses to die. The Prague files close abruptly, the final declassified page stamped, per agreement with Allied powers, no further inquiry authorized. But in the margin, in a handwriting that matches an unknown NATO archivist, one sentence appears faintly in graphite. If it breathes, it remembers. To this day, the Czech state maintains sealed containment zones along the Elbe River marked historical chemical hazard. No official explanation accompanies the restrictions. Locals say that when fog drifts from the river at dawn, it carries the smell of burned iron, and in the silence, one can hear something faint, like air moving through a sealed corridor below. Whatever was once hidden on that train still lingers, just beyond reach, in the grey space between history and oblivion. History, they say, belongs to the victors, but the victors too keep their own ghosts. Across frozen lakes, forgotten railways, and sealed laboratories, fragments of these buried wars still hum beneath the surface, whispering of experiments, trades, and betrayals that were never meant to be recorded. Each file burned, each witness silenced, left only traces, coordinates, code names, and scars in the earth. Somewhere between Leningrad's ice and Prague's dust, the war never truly ended. It simply changed form, waiting, patient, for someone to dig too deep and listen.